This is a Fox News weather alert. Hurricane Irma is now a tropical storm, but that's not stopping the cyclone from continuing to wreak havoc on the southeast. The storm battered Florida yesterday, first landing in the Florida Keys as a Category 4 storm before slowly making its way northward. Over 12 million Floridians are still without power, and over 1 million people in Georgia also had no electricity today. For more on the story, let's go to Steve Harrigan live in Naples, Florida. Steve?
Kimberly, giant trees like this were just pulled out from their roots by winds gusts of up to 142 miles per hour yesterday afternoon in Naples. It has been tough going for the people here. No electricity, a very dark, quiet area. They've been trying to make their way through the streets, down power lines, down trees. Rescue crews are trying to clear those streets. A lot of neighborhoods still flooded, 12 inches of rain here during that storm as well. But the promised storm surge that people were afraid of, it could be 10 to 15 feet, come up suddenly and kill people. That simply did not materialize. The back end of the storm just too weak to make that happen. So while there are roofs down, trees down, power lines down, some serious destruction, not devastating destruction, and most important, no lives lost in the storm in Naples. The big challenge now is electricity. More than 200,000 people without it. No AC. A lot of schools damaged as well. So a lot of families will be having some tough times over the next few days as we wait to get back to normal here in Naples. Kimberly, back to you.
All right, thank you for that report, Steve. And we turn now to Rick Leventhal, who is on the ground in Daytona Beach. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Kimberly, the storm dumped 8 to 12 inches of rain here in Volusia County in a very short period of time, flooding countless streets and neighborhoods like this one in low-lying areas and knocking down trees and power lines, leaving hundreds of thousands of people in the dark in this county alone. But some of the locals in a neighborhood just a few miles from us in Ormond Beach say it was a twister, a tornado, that did the worst damage in this storm, roaring through like a freight train at about 9:30 last night, splintering trees and knocking down utility poles and ripping roofs off of houses, dropping them in neighbors' yards and right in the middle of the street. We talked to some folks who were hunkered down inside the Ormond Beach Masonic Lodge nearby. They thought they'd be safe there. Instead, the storms ripped the roof, the brand new roof, off the structure, and had the people inside thinking that the end could be near.
We're sitting there playing cards, and the lights flickered 3 times, and it went dead silent, and then all of a sudden it sounded like a bomb going off. He did two tours in Vietnam. Three. And I asked him, I said, how close was that to Nam just last night? And he says, ain't going to get no closer to that.
There is a countywide curfew in effect from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in part because of all the debris in the road and the 150 traffic lights that were knocked out, and the cleanup is going to take some time. We shot some additional video on a 360-degree camera, and you can see more of that if you want. You can log on to the Fox News Facebook page at facebook.com/Fox News. You can see that 360-degree video and a lot more stuff. But again, the situation here in Volusia County, not great tonight. They got a lot of work ahead. Kimberly.
All right, thanks, Rick, for that update. And let's go now to Mike Tobin, who is live in Tampa with the very latest. Mike.
And Kimberly, it never got as bad as people feared here in Tampa. The biggest difficulty, like some of the other areas, is power outages. More than half of the population is without power. The primary cause is debris, things like trees hitting the power lines. Crews were staged out of harm's way, but that meant they spent the today driving. Work starts tomorrow. Some communities are talking about weeks till the power comes back on. Tampa Electric is saying it will be a matter of days. The primary source of damage out here, flooding and down trees. Leslie Wilson never doubted the tree in her front yard because it was so big until it came crashing through the roof during the middle of the hurricane last night. It trashed her husband's car. She said she never liked that car anyway. She's glad no one was hurt. The steeple at the historic New Salem Baptist Primitive Church came off during the worst of the storm last night. The pastor, Bishop Benjamin Curry, thanks God that no one was hurt, and that says with the new hole in the roof, you can see all the way to heaven. Kimberly?
Okay, Mike, thank you for that update. So a lot of news that happened this weekend, and just you see the devastation and what people had to deal with on a daily basis, very touch and go in terms of whether or not they were going to be okay, their family members, their loved ones, their children, their homes, everything that they know and loved. And it was just really kind of like minute by minute trying to get the updates. Let's take you around the table and just get some of your reflections. Greg?
Well, one positive thing that when you see something like this is the power of decentralized government. Here you have one of the largest evacuations we've ever seen, and the rest of the country rolls on. That's because this is a bottom-up, decentralized country. Something can happen here. Everything else is happening here, okay. It would be total paralysis in a top-down, centralized, socialist country. We know how to deal with these things. We can run our governments and our military and capitalism and all this stuff while something like this. And that's a good thing. I am not going to miss all the weatherman competing for who can stay outside the longest, and I'll tell you why. It's an unspeakable truth that it looks like fun. Like when you were a kid and there was a storm, you wanted to be outside. And so you're watching this and they're telling us to stay inside, stay out of harm's way. Yet you turned on every single channel and there's a guy looks like he's doing leg splits or, he's stretching his calves and he's leaning in like this. And I'm just watching. I'm going like, I get it. I get it. But this is like if I were a kid, I'd go, maybe I will go outside.
You want them to send you next time?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it looks like fun, and I don't know if that's the message you want to send.
Right. You don't want it to look like wet yoga versus...
It was wet Pilates.
Yeah. Okay, you're into that.
Well,
Dana.
Well, I think that Governor Rick Scott and the mayor of Miami and other cities demanding the evacuation early so that people had enough time to get out was smart. They had a little bit of a problem with the storm going. They thought it would go up the East Coast, it ended up going west. A lot of people evacuated from the east to the west, and then they all tried to get north. But it looks like, just aside from the debris, which it will be tough to deal with and heartbreaking for a lot of people when they have to get home and realize their possessions have to be replaced. But I do think that, again, local government did a very good job. They were smart to demand it. And I also saw today they're cautioning people not to try to return home too quickly because there are, there's no power. I also heard there's no power and no sewer. So we know that Gutfeld would definitely not want to go back home in that.
He wouldn't do well.
The other thing I wanted to say is that we did not have reporters for this particular show in two places that were really hit hard and maybe didn't expect it to be as bad, and that is in Jacksonville, Florida, where they have record flooding, and then also just incredible flooding in Charleston, South Carolina, which is sort of used to it, but it's so beautiful and historic. It's a shame that it has to keep going through it.
Well, and it just shows, the unpredictability of Mother Nature, and you trying to anticipate and prepare, and that's one of the ways that you stop and prevent some of the damage that can happen to people's homes or the loss of life, and trying to anticipate to try to outthink, the storm. But we've seen with the way this has changed in its path and pattern and trajectory, like Dana has mentioned, in other places that we weren't able to show tonight that really got hit hard that weren't anticipating it.
That's why it's so dangerous when you underestimate a storm like this. You have a lot of naysayers who are now looking at the TV. Oh, it started as a Cat 5, 150-mile-an-hour winds. Now it's a tropical storm. We all heard about the catastrophic impact it was going to have, and then people turn on the channel and they see flooding and they see this and they say, oh, the weathermen overhyped it, the media oversold this. But you know what? That's not true. You want to be safe. You want to overhype it if you do believe the stats show that it's going to be catastrophic. And look, even if it wasn't Armageddon, there's horrible flooding. And the Keys are totally devastated. And Jacksonville's still not out of the woods yet. So there's a real human tragedy that's still unfolding right now that people shouldn't be too flip with. The other thing is we heard the soundbite of the guy saying he did 3 tours of Vietnam. And this is close to Vietnam. Weather is war sometimes. The impact is very similar. There's a similar human toll. There's a similar physical toll it takes on the environment. And when governors like Scott or Governor Abbott prepare for something like this, in a way you are preparing for war because it's so unpredictable. You want to just make sure you have all the men, all the assets in the right place because anything can happen. And it looks like the contingency plan of the governor was perfect. I'm not saying there weren't mistakes made, but he erred on the side of caution, and I think he saved a lot of lives. And now the cleanup starts, and it's going to cost a lot of money.
Well, it's true. And, it's not just, the hurricane. You've got the winds to contend with.
Yep.
You had the record flooding, like Dana mentioned, in Jacksonville and also in Charleston. A tremendous amount of damage comes, Juan, when you have that kind of the heavy winds just ripping things apart and the water. I mean, it's just when you just really are always constantly reminded of the strength and the power of the flow of water that comes down from these surges.
Well, I don't think there's any question about it, Kimberly. And the thing that strikes me is, of course, that most people today are just giving thanks to God that it wasn't worse. And the sense was that this was going to be a devastating storm. It was going to wipe out things. And if you're in Miami, that's not the case. There's some flooding, but even as we heard, the surge did not appear, and the surge was what was held the potential to, take people off the streets
right.
and to damage people and property in ways that we can't anticipate because we haven't seen something like that. I think that one of the things that's important to note here is that there is real damage and real lives lost in the Caribbean in much higher numbers where the storm hit earlier. Places like St. Martin's reportedly just devastated. I mean, wiped away. And you go to Barbuda and some of these other so-called Lesser Antilles, and again, damage, just unbelievable
Horrific.
kinds of damage that's going to impact them as we head towards the holiday season when they make their money. But you come up the U.S. East Coast, and again, it's not over because what I'm hearing is that it goes now into not only the Carolinas, but Tennessee, potentially Alabama, and that these areas are now going to be hit with heavy rainstorms, so high rainfall that could do tremendous damage. A lot of us, and I guess it gets back to what Greg was saying, we watch on TV, and it almost becomes like we're watching storm porn. It's like, oh, look at that. Did you see that? Did you see that? Well, you know what? At some point, you got to break away and say, thank God it didn't devastate a state with so many people, with such a large population of elderly.
Very good point, yes, and we don't want to forget about the people, in the Caribbean and whatnot that have been very devastated and impacted by this.